We're sneaking around bookcases and trapping our rivals. That's right! It's Mythic Mischief from IV Studio. In this tactical troublemaking tussle of tomes, 2 to 4 players take on the roles of teams of mythic miscreants. By sneaking through the library collecting tomes, players try to avoid the fearsome roaming Tomekeeper, who will catch and remove them from the library. Players level up their player boards by collecting tomes and gain points by luring their opponents into the Tomekeeper's path. The first team to reach 10 points wins the game. Setup begins with faction selection. We're setting up for a classic 2-player game. We'll explain the 3- and 4-player team variations in a bit. Each player represents a team led by a faction, choosing from monsters, wizards, vampires, or zombies in the base game, and the added witches and trolls factions with the expansions. Players take the associated faction board, mythics, tomes, action dice, and unique tokens or pieces. Players set their action dice on the starting slots of their ability tracks, as noted with the dot icons. These dice should be set so their face-up side shows the same number above the slot. Additionally, they place 1 tome on their legendary ability slot on the bottom left. Next, set the library board in the middle of the table and place the Tomekeeper on the center square. Shuffle the before lunch cards, then draw and reveal 1 card onto the top left slot. Do the same with the after lunch cards on the top right and place it face down. Then for each team in the game, add 1 tome to the score tracker. Next, set up the library based on the before lunch card. Each of these cards has a move value for the Tomekeeper and the location of objects within the library. Place the destination tokens and tomes for each team as listed on the card. Add bookshelves and clutter onto the board based on one of the 3 default layouts shown on page 13 and 14 of the rules. For future games, there's also rules about drafting bookshelf and clutter placement on page 15. Finally, each team rolls a die. The team who rolls a higher number selects which team will go first during gameplay. The first team places their figures, known as mythics, on any space not already occupied by another mythic, the Tomekeeper, or a tome. The second team follows suit. The team that goes second takes 1 tome per player and places it on the leftmost space on a track of their choice before taking their first turn, potentially shifting that action die 1 space to the right. Gameplay occurs in alternating turns, each divided into 3 phases: Mythic Phase, Tomekeeper Phase, and Cleanup Phase. First up, in the Mythic Phase, the active team first returns any previously caught mythics onto any unoccupied secret entrance spaces as notated on the before lunch or after lunch card. Then, they may take actions listed on their board using dice to track the number of available actions remaining in each category by rotating them. Let's look at some of the action options available to all mythics. Move. Either by spending 1 to move to an adjacent space, or spending 2 to move into an adjacent cluttered space, the player may move 1 mythic around the library. Mythics can move through other mythics, but not the Tomekeeper or bookshelves. When moving, if a mythic enters a space with a tome or starts their turn there, the controlling player takes it and adds it to their board. These provide upgrades for abilities in the cleanup phase. Move mythics. Each faction has unique methods for moving allies or enemies on the board depending on the faction. For instance, vampires lure mythics towards themselves with their hypnotic gaze, while wizards use their warping magic to switch spaces with a neighboring mythic. Moving mythics in this way still must obey movement rules of bookshelves. And speaking of rules, in Mythic Mischief, adjacency is defined as orthogonal spaces not blocked by a bookshelf, and neighboring spaces are in diagonal directions as well, also unblocked by bookshelves. Move shelves. Each faction also has a unique way of moving around the bookshelves. For instance, the monsters barge through bookshelves, rotating their position outward 90 degrees, and the zombies can toss shelves onto the opposite side of their current space or of the opposing space. The main rule for this action states that a set of bookshelves cannot completely cut off sections of the board from the rest of the library or align with the outside edge of the library. Distract. This powerful action allows the team to move the Tomekeeper one space toward one of their own mythics per point spent. This action allows players to ignore the cluttered space's movement penalty. Whenever a Tomekeeper enters a space with a mythic, that mythic is caught. The active team gains a point if the caught mythic is an enemy and loses 1 point if it's one of their own or an ally. Caught mythics are removed from the board and will only return at the top of the next mythic phase. Legendary abilities. These special skills can be used by removing the tome from the slot. Tomes can be placed here again in future cleanup phases, but will not refill automatically. Each faction has a unique legendary ability, like the zombie's stench, which shuffles a neighboring Tomekeeper 2 spaces away from one of their mythics. After lunch special. This action can only be taken after lunch, more on what that means in a second, and is also unique to each faction, like the monster's trap, which immobilizes enemy mythics for 1 turn. Once a team has taken all the actions they wish, or if they've run out of actions, they move on to the Tomekeeper Phase. The active player or team moves the Tomekeeper along the quickest path towards its next destination. Each library setup has 3 destination tokens, ordered by number. The Tomekeeper will take the most efficient path possible, moving a number of spaces as listed on the before lunch card to the first destination before moving on to the second and the third. If 2 paths are an equal distance to the destination, the active player chooses which path the Tomekeeper takes. The Tomekeeper also must obey all clutter and bookshelf movement rules. Remember, if the Tomekeeper enters an enemy mythic space, the active player gains a point and the mythic is caught. The same thing occurs if it's their own mythic, but they lose a point instead. If the Tomekeeper reaches the 3rd destination and still has remaining movement, it's going to start heading towards the center square. Finally, in the cleanup phase, the active player sets up for their next turn. They move all action dice to the leftmost empty space on their boards. Tomes sometimes take up these spaces, allowing a player to have a higher starting value on their dice. They can take any acquired tomes and add them to spaces on their tracks, bumping any dice in that space 1 slot to the right. They may also recharge their legendary ability with a newly acquired tome. Then the player may boost 2 abilities in a 2-player game, or 1 ability per player if playing on a team. This means they bump a die temporarily 1 space to the right on its track. They may choose to boost 1 die 2 times. After boosting, they reset all action dice to the numbers shown above the current space. Gameplay continues with players taking turns, moving, distracting, and sneaking around. Once the Tomekeeper reaches the 3rd destination, it uses any remaining movement in the current phase to head towards the center space. Then, after lunch begins. Remove all unclaimed tomes from the library board. Flip the before lunch card face down and the after lunch card face up. Reset the destination tokens as indicated, along with new tomes. Each faction's after lunch special will now be usable. Gameplay continues until one of 2 endgame conditions are met. Either one team reaches 10 points, or the Tomekeeper reaches the 3rd destination on the after lunch card. In the latter case, the player or team that currently has the most points wins the game. And that's the basics of Mythic Mischief. The core game includes a few bonus game options, like 4-player, where 2 teams of 2 players each have 2 mythics each, or 3-player, with 1 team and 1 person playing as an individual. There's also Blitz mode, which requires 2 game boards and a 2nd game box. Turns are timed only 2 minutes per team per turn. All right, friends, that's it. I'm Becca Scott, this is Good Time Society, and you are awesome. Awesome. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like to see me and my friends play this game, check out Game Played. We'll see you there.